Welcome to the Knife Junkie podcast, your weekly dose of knife news and information about knives and knife collecting. Here's your host, Bob the Knife Junkie DeMarco.
Welcome to the Knife Junkie podcast. I'm Bob DeMarco. On this edition of the show, I'm speaking with custom knife maker Nick Bachtel of the Bachtel Forging Company. I first came across Nick's work on Instagram while doom-scrolling big blades, as one does, when I stumbled upon one of his antler crown-handled mirror-polished Bowie knives. It had a perfect fighting profile, exquisite finishing, and as a bonus, a beautiful sheath of my favorite variety, the kind you slip up to the stud under your belt. After following him for a while, I discovered that his offerings go way beyond the Bowie, and his impeccably crafted wares are made with some older school methods and techniques. Nick also, coincidentally, lives and works not far from where I grew up. So next time I'm home to visit the folks, I'll be inviting myself over. We'll find out all about Nick's knife-making career, his philosophy, and the Bachtel Forging Company. But first, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. And you can download the show to your favorite podcast app. If you'd like to help support the show, you can do so on Patreon. Quickest way to get there is to scan the QR code on your screen or head on over to TheKnifeJunkie.com/Patreon. Again, that's TheKnifeJunkie.com/Patreon.
Adventure Delivered, your monthly subscription for hand-picked outdoor, survival, EDC, and other cool gear from our expert team of outdoor professionals. TheKnifeJunkie.com/BattleBox.
Nick, welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you for having me. I greatly appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. As I mentioned up front, really not only love the knives I see on your Instagram feed, and I discovered you also have a YouTube channel, but I like watching you work. I've seen a couple. I saw that Nick's Boots video. Got to see you work in your forge. Pretty fun to watch. And I noticed you have some old school influences. How did you get started in knife making and knives?
Let's see. Well, I think knife making is kind of like it's where all of my interests intersect. And I started making knives when I was 18, fresh out of high school. I grew up as like a crazy wild child kid. I've been a fisherman. I was born a fisherman, and spent a lot of time in the woods, spent a lot of time on the lakes and rivers with my dad. And when you're out there, you kind of learn the value of a good tool. So that's kind of like the very foundation of where I came into knife making and using knives. Growing up, I've always had I've had an interest with things that are old and things that are handmade. And I've been a little bit of an artist. When I was younger, I would draw pictures of fish that I'd catch and birds that I'd see and trees and landscapes and all sorts of stuff. I've had a little bit of natural ability in, that regard, but all of those different paths met and I started making knives. Yeah.
Well, what is it about the handmade stuff? I'm sorry, I just interrupted you right out of the gate.
No,
but,
you're okay.
What is it about handmade things that compel you?
I can kind of remember the first time I saw something handmade and like a light bulb went off. My family and I have a bunch of siblings, and my mom and my dad, we love Christmas, and we have crazy family traditions, and we love like handmade glass Christmas ornaments. We have a giant collection of them that have built up over the years. And we used to go to a German market here in Akron. They don't have it anymore, but German crafts people would come from Germany every winter and sell handmade Christmas ornaments and little very finely whittled sculpted sculptures and just all sorts of really cool stuff. But I must have been 10 or 11, and I would see these like wooden, whittled, I don't even know what they call them, landscapes. And that's the light bulb went off of like, these people are really doing something. They're making something by hand. And the skill that they were, you know, showing off here in Akron, Ohio, they bring in from Germany, was insane. It was insanely gorgeous. And like today, you know, handmade is kind of a trendy, oh, it's handcrafted, blah, blah, blah. The stuff that these German artists were bringing those were purely handmade. And those were the skills that they used to make those little landscapes that they would carve out of wood were probably passed down like generation to generation. That was like purest handmade, high skill, just so cool. And that light bulb went off. And then I had to figure out how to do that. That's like the fire. That's where it started. I think that started the kindling, you know?
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up the Germans in particular. I mean, I'm always impressed by European craftsmanship that came here when there was a huge influx of European immigrants in the early 20th century and the late 19th century. My family and I had the great fortune to go to Germany last spring, and the Cologne Cathedral, it's a giant, I think it might be the biggest cathedral in Europe, but every space inside and outside, I mean, literally, it's almost blindingly beautiful and detailed. Everywhere you look, there's exquisite sculpture from the end of the pews to some corner of a ceiling that you never even look at. Everything is covered with skilled craftsmanship and handwork, and it all looks as if it's made by the same person. It's not like the guy up there was worse than the guy down here. It seems like everyone had this high level of skill.
Oh yeah, and that's exactly what European craftsmen had. That, you know, some American, when they, you know, Europeans came to America, they brought that with them. And we could go on a whole history lesson of some of the old American, like first generation immigrant knife makers in America who made, like, they brought that old world generational knowledge and skill. They brought it to America and made like the coolest, awesome Bowie knives. I mean, that's why I make knives right there. Is just that.
Well, so you decided that lit a fire in you, fire in your belly, will, and you have the idea that you want to make knives. Did it evolve into knives, or is that where you took your craftsmanship right away?
No. So I've been somewhat of a maker and a bit of a entrepreneur since I was, you know, a very young teenager. My dad is a pretty big name in the outdoor community in Ohio, Northeast Ohio. And he had a lot of friends who wanted fishing lures to take on Lake Erie. There's a huge, you know, walleye and perch fishery in Lake Erie, generates a bajillion dollars. And there's some guys up there, the certain lures that they used were pretty simple to make. And one of my dad's friends kind of heard that, oh, Carl's son wants to start making these. They're called crawler harnesses. And I literally, a friend of my dad's who owned a tackle shop gave me some old stuff that he had and said, you know, you want to make them, go right ahead. And I started putting together these crawler harnesses, and then we would go to outdoor shows where my dad would give seminars on fishing, crappie fishing and walleye fishing on Lake Erie and stuff like that. And I would sell these crawler harnesses. I probably sold, maybe not 500, but I made quite a few of them when I was 12. And that was my first, like, this took me years to realize, even after I started knife making. I was like, oh, I've had this kind of entrepreneurial maker spirit like forever. Those crawler harnesses, I like I said, it took time to realize, but that the seed was sown, and like, hey, you can make stuff with your hands, and there's people who will buy nice stuff. They didn't like the stuff that they sold at the tackle store, so they would come to me and commission these crawler harnesses, and I would crank them out for them, and that was good fun. But as a teenager, you quickly figure out, making things for other people, you figure out expectations and meeting people's expectations and all that fun stuff. And the crawler harness business kind of petered out. Not, I wanted to go fishing. That's what it came down to. I wanted to go fishing. I didn't want to be at home making stuff. So I would still make my dad's stuff. But that was another, like, there was a couple endeavors when I was younger, like seeing the handmade German, carved Christmas ornaments, or, making crawler harnesses and selling them for money, and people were dishing out money and paying for them. There's a handful of small endeavors like that it makes sense of where I am now. Being a knife maker. I'm working on my 8th year of just being a knife maker. So, yeah.
I feel like I've seen, and I think I'm considerably older than you are, but I feel like I've seen in the last 20 years or so, like this shift away from the slick thing being the thing that you want, and moving to the maker's economy, and artisanal products and that kind of thing, whether it's in food or in clothing and that kind of thing. When you kind of moved 8 years ago, when you started making knives, how did you decide on how? Well, you'll tell us about your process, but there are a lot of very slick, and I shouldn't put it that way. There are a lot of modern ways to make knives, and you don't kind of do those. Tell us how you make a knife. Tell us how you got into it and how you learned, and what it is about that process.
Yeah. So I started making knives right out of high school when I was 18. I kind of didn't know what I wanted to do. And I was always kind of an artistic kid who also ran wild in the woods and in the river. I probably spent more time, walking a river with a fishing rod in hand than I have, walking in all other aspects of my life. When I started making knives, like I said, I was just out of high school. I kind of didn't know what I wanted to do. Should I go into the military? Should I become a welder? And I kind of dipped my toe in that world, in a short, maybe 6 months long. I worked in a welding shop. I hated it. It sucked. It was terrible. It took me a while to figure out that I don't follow the rules very well. And I managed to get an anvil. I'm not at liberty to let you know how I got it, but let's say an anvil presented itself to me, and I took that,
Opportunity.
anyways, yeah, I took that opportunity. The ends justify the means, and that anvil will be returned to its rightful. I come from a blue collar family. My dad works for the news. My mom's a nurse, and I have a couple other siblings. I have 2 sisters and a little brother, and there wasn't a whole lot of money to be thrown around. I don't come from a family where, dad will buy this for you and stuff like that. So I got an anvil. I made that happen. In my shop class in high school, I took. Oh, I'm rambling already.
All right, tell us how you got into knives.
I'm wrapping it up. So let's just say I started my knife shop. I built a coal forge, and I had an anvil. I had no idea of where I was going from there. So I literally just started. I found a place that sold coal. Thankfully, they were close by. Got coal, got a hammer, and just started putting the pieces together. I started knife making like, I'm not in the Forged and Fire crowd. I'm just like 1 year before that, maybe. I had an anvil. I started getting steel hot, and I just spent hours and hours and hours figuring it out from nothing. And 8 years later, you know, it's the hardest way to go about knife making. Doing it completely on your own without a mentor or without a teacher of some sort. But that's how I got started. And just within a month or two, I had my first knife. And then somebody commissioned a little knife. It was an ugly little Puko, a little Scandinavian type.
Mm-hmm.
But it was great. And I sold to him. It went to his dad for Christmas. And that was kind of the beginning of it. And it's time in the shop, finding what I like and just sticking to those instincts and just following my heart, I guess, following my heart. And just, if I like something, figure out how to do it, figure out how to make it. I didn't have money to buy a cool knife, so I figured I'd make my own. And that's kind of, that leads to making, you know, some pretty nice, pretty good looking Bowie knives.
Yeah, I'll say so. And not just Bowie knives, also daggers. We just saw some of your daggers up on screen. But what I find interesting, I mean, is that even, you know, forging a knife is kind of an old school way of doing it, or one way of doing it that's less modern than others. But the fact that you use a coal forge is very interesting to me. There aren't too many modern day forgers who do that. I don't think. I mean, I haven't spoken to many of them.
No,
Most
yeah,
people
you're right.
that speak to, they use the big gas forges like you might see on Forged and Fire.
Yeah. I just like old stuff. Like, if anything will become apparent from our little podcasting today, it'll be that I am cut from some old timey cloth. I am born 150 years too late or something like that. The coal, like, I was just drawn to it. I love the old, dirty. It's awesome. And thankfully, coal offers, there's some advantages over propane. One being that it's cheaper. You save some money there. But on a blade, you can heat up. You can get small isolated heats. Let's say you want to straighten the tip of a knife. In a gas forge, you pretty much get the entire blade hot. In a coal forge, you can work on small segments of the blade and just get a small segment of it hot. And so there's some advantages there. Other than that, it's just cool, man. I love it. I forge with my coal forge almost every single day. And like you said, there's not a whole lot of knife makers who use it. I can only think of one, master bladesmith Lynn Ray, who's a good friend. He just tremendous craftsman, but he loves the coal. I think he does a little bit of both, but I hope to forge with coal until forever. You know, I love it. I hope it never goes away. You know,
Can you get extra carbon for the steel? I don't even know if that's the right way of putting it, but does the coal imbue any carbon into the steel?
I don't know. I'm not gonna say it does. You do get some. You don't, in a propane forge, you burn the carbon out of your steel. It's called decarburization. If you forge on a knife for hours, you will literally leach the carbon out of the blade. With coal, it doesn't happen. It happens a little bit, but not nearly as bad. You know, I've forged some blades with a good friend of mine who has a coal forge, and you always have to worry about that decarburization layer. You have to make sure you grind through that to get to good steel. But with coal, I've never really ran into that issue. It's like something I don't think about.
Okay, so you mentioned before we started rolling, you have an earlier blade with you. You have several blades, but I want to see this
Mhm.
early one you were talking about first.
Okay. It was about 3 years in, and I had a show to go to, and I wanted to make a little Bowie knife that I could hang on to and carry, and this is that.
Oh, that is cool.
Um, for being 3 years in, it was the best work that I had produced at the time. It had a really clean, like 600 grit hand sanded finish, and this cool little top clip. Let's see if we can get in there.
Yeah, that looks like a Sheffield clip right there.
Yeah, exactly. A little filed in type Sheffield style clip. A lot of those influences. Um, this guard is actually hot fit on here. So you
What
get the
does that
guard
mean?
hot. So you get the guard hot, and you put the blade in a vise, and you get the guard ripping hot, and you hammer it onto the shoulders of the blade.
Oh,
So
wow.
the blade literally sits into a little, um, like two little recessed shoulder spots for to sit into. But that it was done hot, and that's how a blades or a blacksmith would have fit up a guard. Like maybe if they were making swords or something. It's not always the super cleanest fit up, but it does look cool. So this has a hot fit guard, a little coffin handle, love it.
Yeah. Is that leather
And
stacked? Stacked leather?
no, it's curly maple.
Oh, God.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to see if it'll focus.
I can see. Yeah, hold it right there.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, I see that.
But this is some Ohio curly maple. It's some locally grown stuff, um, with an aqua fortis finish, which is like an acid finish that gun makers used to use, pre 1900, like in the old black powder days. They wouldn't use stain. This is I guess it's a kind of stain, but it darkens it up, and you get this really nice tiger striping, and it doesn't fade over time. And then this little pommel nut, the nut I made, it all screws together. This is actually a takedown, so
Oh,
I could unscrew this, take the whole blade apart, and clean it back up. It's a pretty dirty knife, and I doubt I'll ever clean it up. But yeah, it's a full takedown.
looks like it's been sharpened a few times too by the.
Oh yeah, that's it. I can't stand knife makers who make knives and don't use them. And this one, I've taken this one across America twice. Been, I can't tell you how many trips and how many trout this thing is filleted, and how many, you know, it's done a lot of work. And to be honest with you, it's not that great of a knife. But I learned so much. You kind of learn what makes a good knife. The best knife is the one you have, and this is the one that I've had. I still carry it. I carried it today.
That's cool. That's your personal carry. That little Bowie. It
Hmm.
looks like it has about a 5-inch blade, maybe 5.5-inch blade.
Yeah, about 5.5. Handles maybe 4.25 or so. Really handy little size. I probably wouldn't make a Bowie knife any smaller than that, but great little size.
So when you look at that now, what do you think? I mean, I know you think it's a great, useful tool, but what have you learned? What did you learn from that knife? And I ask that because I'll look at old drawings and think, oh my gosh, what was I
Hmm.
doing then? Um,
Um, I've learned that as much as it's cool to heat treat a blade in a coal forge, which is what I did on that little Bowie knife. Um, the oven is nice. The oven is hard to argue with, because this knife, it takes a good edge, and it's pretty good, and I have no problem sharpening it. But um, that an oven heat treatment that's what you got to stick to. So consistency through heat treating, that's like one thing. You know, it was apparent that I needed to step it up in that department. Um, I don't know. It's a really nice knife. It's pretty straight. I remember handing this knife to people, and they would look at it, like people who've never made a knife, people who don't. don't even collect, not a whole lot of, they go, it looks a little crooked. Oh, it looks crooked. Like, screw you, man. That's not crooked. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
And it kind of made me, it made me realize that, like, some people are kind of full of it, We can get into that more. I have some I'm a little bit of a opinionated fellow when it comes to,
Well, yeah. I mean, that's as it should be, especially people who are creators for a living. You're going to have very, very, you've got all your skin in that game. You're going to have some pretty well-entrenched opinions about things and how they should be. It's funny. I was at a dinner party not too long ago, and oh, you're into knives? Yeah. And I was talking to a chef, professional chef, great guy. But I hand him the knife out of my pocket, and he's like, that edge needs to be touched up. And I was so offended. It's like, what do you mean? And,
yeah.
And then I just let it go. But he's also used to super thin chef's knives. And
right.
That has
I think one of the most frustrating things as a maker is I've made some awesome knives. They're just undeniably awesome. I'm not here to, stroke my ego or say that I make the best knives or anything, but undeniably, it was an undeniably awesome knife. You send it to somebody who I thought was knowledgeable and was, knew what was worth their salt a little bit. And they come back and go, it's not sharp. And I go, no, it's sharp. It's ground to almost zero. It has, the smallest little secondary bevel, polished the burr off, but that's the thing. It had a polished edge. So when you feel it, you don't feel that burr.
Mm-hmm.
You just feel that polished edge. They go, it's not sharp. And they go, okay, cut something with it. And they go, oh, I see. That's it. It's razor. It's so sharp. It just has a polished edge. And, it showed up, but it's not sharp. It's like, come on, man. Yeah. I will sit there and sharpen a knife for 2 hours, just going back. Oh, I think it could be a little bit better. Oh, I think the burr needs a little bit more here. I will go through, like, I have the magazine papers, and I'll just sit there, make sure that every inch of that blade is just ridiculously sharp. And then I take it, wipe oil on it, put it in the sheath, put it in the box, ship it. So I am 100% sure that it's, people make mistakes. I make mistakes, that's for sure. But I know the knife is sharp. Come on.
So let's see. You mentioned that you just finished up one for your father.
Yeah.
And I know that I focus a lot on Bowies and the more combative designs like daggers and stuff. But you do a lot of other stuff. If you look on your past work page on your website, you see tons of variety. Can we see the one that you just finished for your father?
Yes. So my dad was due for a good knife. It's been a while. I made him a knife a long time ago, but it was an early one. I think my headphone went out. Is it good?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, I don't know what the heck's going on. Okay. So this is the knife I made him. Let's see.
Yeah.
There's some terrible lighting in here, but this is what I call my companion. It's named after my dad because he's been my companion out there in the woods, and everybody needs a good companion. Everybody needs one of these.
It looks, so just to describe it to people who might just be listening, it reminds me, the blade, well, it's a clip point, but it reminds me just a little bit of the old Marbles outdoors knife.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
I know exactly what you're talking about. So this knife, it's a pretty close copy to the hunting knives made in like the late 1800s by a couple of bladesmiths in San Francisco, like the Gold Rush, California bladesmiths. There was only a couple of them, but they made some absolutely gorgeous, timeless timeless knives. And those, I mean, pure Americana, so cool. And this is pretty much a copy. I'll have to send you a picture of like this hunter, but it's just a heavy blade clip point hunter. Webster marbles, like you're talking about,
Mm-hmm.
they basically copied what they were making in San Francisco. So all those knife makers, the one guy who I really like died in 1884 or something. Another company in San Francisco was open well into like the 20s, but they kind of went from knives to gambling equipment and like kitchen stuff like lemon squeezers and stuff like that. But in about 1900 or the late 1890s, the Webster Marble Company came out, and they were making similar clip point hunters like that. They were basically very close copies to what they were making, 50 years ago back in old San Francisco. So this is very like, you see those influences of those knife makers 120 years ago. I just went to the source.
Is that a 0 ground swedge?
This one, it's ground 0, and then I literally just dust it off. I don't want a sharp clip on this.
Yeah.
This is for my dad, and he's not out there, fighting people in the streets necessarily. He's out there ice fishing, sitting on a bucket, having a good time. But go ahead.
It looks like this tang has a distal taper and like some sort of a bone handle.
The handle is moose. It's moose antler. It's the interior moose antler. And of course, this side, it's kind of hard to see, but the side with my stamp on it, like the show side, has some of that pith, which is fine. It's super tough. It looks just like bone or like ivory. And then the other side is like a perfect, super hard, clear, white, gorgeous handle material, just tough as nails, and it's natural. I don't really use plastic handle materials like G10 or micarta. They're cool, they're fine. I like natural stuff.
Got you. Well, I interrupted you. You were saying you were trying to do something. You said this knife is for my dad. He's not fighting in the street, and then I interrupted.
Oh yeah. I have like myself, I've been using this other knife for ages. It's kind of a case of, and other knife makers know this 100%. It's like the cobbler or the shoemaker. The shoemaker's kids don't wear shoes, right? They, you got to be selling knives to make the money. So you kind of not take advantage of the people around you. But what I'm trying to say is my dad deserved a really great knife, not just kind of an afterthought, So, I made him this knife for Christmas. I hate deadlines, and but I managed to get it done. I got it done like a week in advance, and he collects old little imperial pocket knives, like fish knives.
Yeah.
And he's been asking me for months to make him a little like belt sheath to put his folding knives in. And on Christmas, he's sitting there in his chair, and we're all opening up gifts. And I give him the box. He opens it up, and I go, "It was just the sheath for this knife, this right here."
Oh, nice.
And I go, see if your imperial folder fits in that. And he puts it in there, and it's like wobbling around. He's like, "What the heck?" And I go, "All right, try this one." And I handed this to him, and he was just like, "Oh man, it's great."
That's cool.
Yeah, man.
Oh, I hope one of my daughters goes into knife making, because that sounds like an awesome Christmas gift.
Yeah. And I've been making knives for a long time, and like my parents, my shop is at their house, and they allow me to do that. And in the early days, and even fairly recently, where am I going like, oh, should I keep making knives? Like this is tough. It's tough business, and it's tough to do. And where my dad could be like, oh, you go get a job, go get some security, it's time to have a family of your own, whatever. My dad was like, No, stick to knife making. It's just because you get some job somewhere doesn't mean that your life's going to be easy. Like, it's all work. It's all, it's all tough. So, and like my mom is right there. They're just let me do my thing. And, they're just fantastic. I couldn't be more thankful.
Yeah, there's nothing that you can do without hard work. Okay, Jim, if you would stop right there, actually. These are the knives I was trying to describe to you. I'm not sure what the influence is. What are these? I've seen you making a number of these recently on this top row here.
Yes. So on the top row, those are those San Francisco Gold Rush era type Bowie knives and daggers. So that one, I think those aren't the same knives, but it's a very similar 7-inch Bowie. That dagger, they have bronze sheaths that have a leather liner inside them. I just finished one of these and I shipped it out last week. My client was putting the pressure on to get it out, so I wish I would have had it today. But it was that on my Instagram. It was that wrought iron San Mai, with the elk antler and the bronze. That's the one I just finished up. Those, like you were talking about, those old European craftsmen. So in like the 1850s, there was a German guy. There was a guy who came from Germany, and his name was Frederick Will, and he was part of Will and Fink. I believe he was the knife maker, and the other guy is Michael Price, and that's like my favorite. I want to name my son Michael Price because I love these knives so much. It is why I make knives. He was an Irish immigrant who came from Limerick, Ireland, during the 1850s, like right after the gold rush in California happened. And he brought that generational, like his dad was a knife maker, his dad's dad was a knife maker, or a cutler as they would call it back in those days, and in Europe. And you bring that generational knowledge to America, to California, the land of gold. They're pull money out of and just they bring that generational skill to the land of gold where there's so much money, and it's the frontier. It is so crazy. Gamblers are stabbing each other at the poker table or the faro table, and there's guys skinning thousands of buffalo in Montana during the Great Buffalo Kill, and there's people fighting at gold claims. There's newspaper stories of guys using Michael Price knives recorded in like gold claim disputes, and guy coming out and saying that he killed 4 guys with this little gentleman's kind of Bowie knife. That's so cool. That gives me like goosebumps just thinking about it. But that is like, those are the knives I love. That's the stuff I want to make. And like you were saying earlier, there are so many modern CNC machines and plasma cutters, and you got to crank out a bajillion knives. I hate that. I want to run away from that as far as I can. I hate the computerized everything. I want to run a shop that runs off of steam, and I have a steam power hammer, so I'm getting there.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, I'm getting there.
Actually, I want to. We're going to talk in a minute about some of your old school tools.
Mm-hmm.
But before we move on to that, there are 2 things I want to talk about. First of all, as I mentioned in my intro to you, I love your sheaths also.
Mm-hmm.
And these bronze sheaths, are you making the bronze? I'm presuming that you make those also. How the hell do you make a bronze sheath?
Well, to start off, I do the blades. I forge the blades, heat treat them all in house, do all the handles, and then I do all the leather working too. So I am like a sole maker. I make everything on these knives. The bronze sheaths, traditionally, I've made them out of bronze, copper, and nickel silver and sterling silver. And it is, you take a sheet of this material, whatever it is, We can just say silver because that's what was used traditionally. And you make a steel pattern of your knife. And, there's a little Bowie that I'm working on. I don't think this one's going to get a metal sheath, but this is kind of one that I would make a metal sheath for.
Mm-hmm.
I would make a steel pattern that follows the knife, but there's a little bit of slop. There's a little bit extra material on the pattern. And then I cut 2 tracings of the pattern onto the silver, the metal that I'm making the sheath out of. And then I hammer 1/2 of that sheath around the pattern, and then I do the other side, and then I silver braze them together to make basically like a tube. And then you clean up the seam, get that seam perfect. On the nickel silver ones, you can't even see, like it looks like one piece of that would be crazy. It looks like one piece because the silver brazing material like looks just like the nickel silver. Anyways, so yeah, tons of polishing, but you get that fit. I've made maybe 6 of these metal sheaths now, but you make that sheath body over that mandrel, over that pattern, and then you make a leather liner that follows the blade. It's literally wet formed to whatever blade is going in the sheath. I hammer it so it's a perfect glove fit, and then I grind the outside of this leather sleeve that fits into the metal sheath, and the blade slips right in. And that's how they did it in 1860, 1870. Why they would need a metal sheath back in those days is crazy, but they are so cool. There is nothing like one of those sheaths, and like the leather retention. It's the pinnacle of handmade knives, in my opinion.
That's probably why they did it, because it's so cool. It's probably a bragging rights kind of thing. And I also noticed on the outside you have a clip, so presumably that goes over the belt in lieu of a stud, so the whole thing slips under your belt.
Yeah, those little spring clips, I make those too. They're cut and bent and forged and heat treated and everything. Those can either go in your belt. On smaller daggers,
that's the one.
You can, that's the antler, the crown. The clips on the metal sheaths, traditionally, a lot of these old gold rush knives were small and concealable, and it was in the time in American history where big Bowie knives were getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And so, like, I have one of these San Francisco Bowie knives that has the little spear point shape with the long clip and the guard. This is what it looks like before the handle, the tang is forged after the guard is fit. That's a whole nother process. The spring clips, this little knife will have a metal sheath with a spring clip on it, and guys would conceal them like right in their, like a vest pocket, or like a vest, like right in the arm opening. I mean, you could draw that out and stab the guy who just stole your nugget of gold or whatever. They were small, like gentlemen's knives, but they were made during a time where people actually used them. And that makes it for me for sure.
You also do push daggers, which to me, I always think of, in the cummerbund of a riverboat gambler or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. I just finished one of those that had a pink ivory handle. It was super cool, but same kind of deal. Just a small but robust knife that you could conceal and, pull it out when you need to do some work, man.
There it is.
That was a slick little, oh yeah.
That's a beaut. Oh man. So also something I wanted to talk to you about. I saw another video on your YouTube channel where you talk about sort of gaming out a knife. Like you don't just throw yourself into it. You're trying out different handles and making mock-up handles and that. And do you know which video I'm talking about?
Yeah. I made a little wood pattern.
Process.
Yeah. For the longest time, and even still in my process, I kind of gather what inspires me and come together on an idea, usually for a client or something. Most of my knives are custom order. Sometimes I'll have one extra, but they usually don't last too long, which is a good problem to have. But
Yeah.
we kind of come together. Hey, I want a 6-inch San Francisco Gold Rush Bowie knife. And I said, okay, I got this. I have some handle material, fossilized walrus ivory or elk antler or this or that. And I'm not going to sit here and say that I just straight up copy antique knives, but what they're made in the same vein. And once you kind of get the measurements and the patterns and stuff, it doesn't take a whole, there's not a whole lot of, not creative going. There's ton of creative, exercise going on, but there's not, what am I trying to say here?
Like, you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time.
Yeah, exactly. I think these knives are so timeless, so good looking, and they just have a certain look that they're undeniably awesome. That's what it comes down to. They're so timeless, they're so Americana, and I can kind of put my own little touches, like this knife, little clip point Bowie knife. It's a mirror polish, so it's going to be hard to, but it has a little coffin handle. They didn't make any. They made maybe 1 or 2 coffin handles in San Francisco at that time period. This knife will be within the same lines, but with sort of my own, I love a coffin handle. It's sort of my own additions to it,
Your interpretation of this kind of class.
Yeah,
This is
exactly.
a beauty. Hold that up so we can take a look at that. So you're very much drawn to the high polish, I've noticed.
Oh yeah.
Is that just is that you, or is that because it's integral to the kind of knife you're talking about?
A little bit of both. So as much as I like kind of historical knives and stuff, I am a knife user. I have been a knife user for longer than a knife maker. And the mirror polish on a high carbon steel knife is great. Water or blood or whatever you're doing, any moisture, just beads right off a mirror polish. And, if you take a knife that has like a fairly rough satin finish, if you look at that surface microscopically, there's tons of little hills and valleys, and that catches moisture and that blade will rust really quickly. A mirror polished high carbon steel knife, it'll patina, but mirror polishing literally smears the surface and like seals the surface of a knife blade. I don't use stainless steel. I don't like it. I'm sure that'll conflict with lots of folks. I either love stuff or I hate it. And I hate stainless steel. I like knives, high carbon steel knives that patina and tell a story. And all of those old knives, they tell a story. And the stuff I make, I love seeing a crazy mirror polished Bowie knife that has gone through somebody using it and has a patina and tells a story. I love that. That's why I make knives, But yeah, the mirror polish is functional, and it's undeniably awesome. It looks too good. People pick it up and it catches light and reflection, and they suck to get pictures of. It's hard to get that reflection right, but in your hand, people like shiny things, and that's.
You were showing a special tool that you use to get that mirror polish. You want to show that?
Yeah. So we'll talk some more about the old machinery, but one of the things that I really like to do is learn about the old techniques that they used, back in the 1870s or in the 1900s, and bring them back today and try to replicate those techniques, because those guys back then knew how to make knives and make a lot of knives and make knives really well. And I think we've lost a lot of that to, a 2x72 belt grinder is so easy and convenient. We've lost a lot of really cool technology to conveniency, if that's a word. Anyways, this is one of my, it's called a glazed wheel, which is what my friends in the UK, like in Sheffield, they still use these, but they don't talk about them. This is a 10-inch soft cushion wheel that you paint the outside edge. It's a buffing wheel. You paint the outside edge in hide glue, and then you roll that glue edge in emery or aluminum oxide abrasive and make a polishing wheel. So, they have polishing wheels with different polishing compounds and stuff. Those are usually really fine. This one is a 280 grit, and it'll remove material. And this is a fairly loose sewn wheel, and it smooths a knife grind and makes like the perfect convex, slight convex grind. Smooth things over so well, better than any modern, if you want to make a convex ground blade, guys will use a rotary platen. And I have a rotary platen. It's great for some things, but knives, like a flat on a knife, these are better. These you can do some really cool things with these, and you can get polishing wheels in all different kinds of densities, like different stitch, spiral sewn or a loose sewn like this. Paint that hide glue on there. And it's crusty looking. It's like sandpaper on a wheel.
Yeah.
And it gets really hard. I just made this one. It might need to set up a little bit more. And then it's like a grinding stone, but then you break the surface. You can hear it kind of cracking a little bit.
Yeah.
And it softens the face of that polishing wheel, and you just get the smoothest grinds with it. It was like an aha moment when I actually made them and figured out, because there's a few smiths in Sheffield, England, who use these, and I think guys use in America, they're called setup wheels in like automotive factories. So when they make a bumper on like a bus or something, you have all these like not grind marks, but tooling marks from where they bend and stuff like that. And you want to smooth those out. These wheels, they still use today in factories and stuff. They're really great for smoothing things out and getting not perfectly flat. Perfectly flat is the enemy of a good knife. To smooth things out and get a nice convex grind on a knife. You smooth out a bumper with one of these wheels, and they leave a great finish, and they're super cool, but nobody knows about them. I think guys make them in factories, and that knowledge stays in the factory. It's not an industry secret necessarily. I don't think it's hit the like hobbyist knife making world really. Back in the day, that's what they used to do, and they used to use leather wheels to polish knives. Kind of similar to this wheel. I like felt wheels, and those are pretty common for sharpening. But you can kind of do the same thing with some different polish array compounds, and like it's basically grit and glue, just like that. And I mean, that's how I got this blade. Has a fantastic mirror polish on it. It's still not even all the way there. I mean, you can see this was done on a felt wheel with some of that polishing compound, not a 2x72 grinder like a lot of people use. Just taking the old techniques and using the old techniques in the modern age to make stuff that's fantastic. It's so cool. I love it.
Show us that hammer that you made and that you forged.
Oh yeah, kind of in the same thing, like a lost technology. Look at that lump. That is a Sheffield style cutler's hammer, and this is one that I forged off of some some pictures and measurements that a friend in England sent me of his originals. And it's like a dog's head hammer. Okay, camera's over here. It is a dog's head hammer. It weighs 4 pounds, and all of the weight is out. I can literally stand this up on my anvil and it'll just sit there.
Right.
But it's a very weight forward hammer. Like I said, it weighs about 4 pounds. But this thing, it swings so hard and it moves steel like magic. Like it really, boom. I don't even know how to describe it. You got to use it just to,
Well, is this something that you make for other makers or would make for other makers?
Yeah, I would. I've made a couple of them. I sent one to Hawaii to my friend Neil Kamimura.
Oh yeah, he's
the
awesome.
coolest. Yeah, he has one of them. I think that might be the only one out there. But I have that one and this one. Yeah. But they're not very common. You can find them like through antique dealers sometimes, but they're like $500 because they're so sought after, and they're very similar to like a file cutter's hammer. Those Sheffield made everything steel, and they figured out the best tools to make files or to make knives. Like there's a video on YouTube of some 80-year-old guy using a hammer probably bigger than this that looks just like it to forge pocket knife blades that are this big.
Wow.
And just not a single miss hit, just years and years and years of reps, just insanity. That's the kind of craftsman that I want to be,
He's got a giant right forearm, I bet.
Oh yeah, yeah. Boom. Be some
So-
little like Sheffield. Head down to the old cut and do my hammering. Yeah. Like, oh yeah, it's so cool, man. I love seeing stuff like that. I wish more of it was still around, but
So we're about up to our hour, but I wanted to ask you this question. Okay, you're a modern day guy with a modern day business, making knives in a tradition, using traditional methods and such. What kind of advice would you give to knife makers that are where you were 8 years ago, and they're trying to figure out what their identity is and how they're supposed to do a business? Well, do you have any advice?
Yes, I'll ramble on this too.
You need, I think, in any kind of creative endeavor, to get good and be successful at it, you need to produce your best work and do it often. You need to have reps, and it's like you need to have not hundreds of knives, but you need to put out lots of your best work and keep going and keep going. Spend time in the shop. It's gonna suck. You're gonna fail, but you have to fail more than I have failed more times than people have tried, right? That's a pretty common thing, but it's true. My San Francisco Bowie knives, I've finished maybe 10, maybe a dozen of them, but I have a bucket of maybe 50 blades that just weren't good enough. Throw it in the bucket. Tomorrow's a new day. Get good, get better, put more time in, more reps. And then I should have finished a lot of those knives, but I didn't. Finish knives and get them out there and get them in front of people, and then get back to it. You need reps. You need reps of completing things and putting them out there. Focusing, like you want to get good at grinding a knife, just grind little mild steel knives, grind 100 of them, then throw them away to develop that skill. Then start making knives and do the very best that you can and put it out there in the world. And then start that process all over again and just keep doing reps.
So is this sort of a perfection is the enemy of the good kind of thing? Like, are you suggesting a lot of people don't put the knives out there because they're worried it's not their best work?
No, my headphone went out, so we're just gonna let her ride. I think we're almost finished up. So, I I am a perfectionist. I have crazy OCD. Like I said, I have a bucket of blades because the stamp was just a little bit too out of plumb. That's crazy. I'm being crazy. Those should have been finished, and like those knives would have been good money, whatever. Um, do the best that you're capable of doing realistically. You don't let perfection slow you down. I have done that and I regret it. Do, you know, let's say the very best do the best you can consistently and put them out there in the world and get them in front of people. Um, when I started knife making, the first time I ever went to a knife show was in like 2023. So I've been up here in Northeast Ohio making my knives, just being a nut, crazy OCD perfectionism. And then I finally went to Blade Show and I saw the knives that other people were putting out, and it kind of settled my perfectionism a little bit. Because I go, oh, I'm not looking at a photograph of a knife. It's easy to get a good photograph of a knife and make it look perfect. But to see it in your hand, that's when you can see not mistakes, but characteristics of, oh, this is what this maker thinks is acceptable. Well, there was a lot of things that I saw that I wouldn't think that, I wouldn't let leave my shop. And then, the more you see, you're going to go, maybe my knives are a little bit better than the average knife, or better than, a hobby maker, better than, maybe I got something here. And you just keep that going, and just reps, man. Just put reps in the shop. I feel bad for guys who work a full-time job and can only get a couple hours in a week.
Yeah.
You got to live out there, man, and just experiment and try, and don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to waste money either. I don't have a whole ton of money, but I've wasted a lot of it, but I have learned so much. Just you learn through doing, like the reps out there.
Yeah.
YouTube videos are great. They don't teach anything, and people think they get a PhD from a YouTube video or something. School of Hard Knocks, 8.5 years.
Well, that's great advice straight across the board, whether you're a knife maker or not. Reps is it.
Mm-hmm.
Nick, thank you so much. Nick from the Bachtel Forging Company. I really appreciate your joining me. We're going to talk a little bit more for the patrons, but thank you so much for joining me. It's been a blast.
It's been a pleasure. I hope I know I've rambled so much, but hey, that's just who I am.
Hey, rambling about knives ain't rambling at all, sir.
That's it.
All right,
I appreciate it.
Do you like the sound of the alphanumeric combinations M390, 204P, and 20CV, but bristle at 8CR, 13MOV, and AUS-8? You are a knife junkie. Probably worse.
There he goes, ladies and gentlemen. Nick of the Bachtel Knife Forging Company. Really looking forward to getting one of his knives in hand, and hopefully, I didn't even ask, hopefully we get to see him at Blade Show this year or next year, and we'll be able to make that possible. I myself am going to invite myself over next time I'm in Northeast Ohio. All right, thanks for joining me on this podcast. To Jim, working his magic behind the switcher, I'm Bob DeMarco saying until next time, don't take dull for an answer.
Thanks for listening to the Knife Junkie Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and review at reviewthepodcast.com. For show notes for today's episode, additional resources, and to listen to past episodes, visit our website, TheKnifeJunkie.com. You can also watch our latest videos on YouTube at TheKnifeJunkie.com/YouTube. Check out some great knife photos on TheKnifeJunkie.com/Instagram, and join our Facebook group at TheKnifeJunkie.com/Facebook. And if you have a question or comment, email them to bob@TheKnifeJunkie.com or call our 24/7 listener line at 724-466-4487, and you may hear your comment or question answered on an upcoming episode of the Knife Junkie Podcast.